Good afternoon, everyone. This is the July 2nd meeting of the Salina City Commission. It's 4 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. We have a roll call, please.
Mayor Ryan.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Hay.
Here.
Commissioner Hodges. Here. Commissioner Hoppick.
Here. If you're able, would you please stand? We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Awards and proclamations. We have none. Citizens Forum. If there's anyone that would like to address this commission today, please come forward.
Hello, thank you. Although some may not consider the term tar baby to be a racial slur, it doesn't have any place in public discussion. When you limit your reactions with others who don't look like you or have different beliefs racially and culturally, then you narrow your view of the world. I'm here speaking at this moment as president of the Salina NAACP Unit 4041. Mr. Mayor, you don't have any right to tell anyone how to feel about anything. You really don't. And when you use the words, if I offended, it means you really don't care. You don't think you've offended anyone. That's not true. The words you said were very offensive. The laughter and behavior after those comments was just as offensive. Now I'd like to speak to you as a black man, a father, a husband, and a son of some proud parents. How am I supposed to react when words like that are used? If I become angry, curse, yell, then I'm labeled the angry black guy. If I say nothing or just brush it under the rug, I'm considered an Uncle Tom. How am I supposed to explain this sort of racism and bigotry to my kids? How?
If you're waiting for an answer from me, there really isn't any.
Yeah.
We're not here to give answers. I'm sorry.
Well, I kind
don't
of think you
have
work
an
for
answer
us
for
as
that.
citizens, so, you know. How do we react? It was overreaction by your words, but how am I supposed to react? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Millie P. Moy. I'm at 2731 Bobby Place here in town. Mr. Mayor, I wish to invite you into my concern. Why were you laughing after and during the tar baby reference?
I don't recall that I was laughing at the reference. I was just referring to the situation that we were discussing at that time. So, sorry. I wasn't looking at it as humor in a racial sense of any kind. There wasn't any racial thought in my mind at the time. I'm sorry that I'm, this has been an embarrassing incident for me, and I will admit that I was ignorant in these regards, so I've said I'm sorry. I appreciate the conversation I had with Eric Willey of the Journal, and I think he was very fair in the article that he put in the paper, that he was, accurate and fair, and I appreciated that. So I really don't know what else I can say for you. It's been a learning experience for me.
Mr. Mayor, as one grows, develop, emerges, there is the need to redefine one's role in relationship to the institution through which services are rendered. I recommend to you for the duration of your tenure, be the leader who seeks out help for delivering sensitivity and multicultural understanding for this organization, for today and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erin Berquist. I live at 2013 East Bank Drive. When I heard the tar baby comment, I thought that a tar baby was an effigy made out of tar that would have been hung from a tree to threaten people of color of lynching. That's what I thought it meant. So imagine how I would have felt if I was black and that's what I thought. If I may, I have some pictures that I printed up of graphics of the tar baby. These circulated throughout the 20th century, and they're products that have used the tar baby for merchandising purposes. If you guys want to look at these, pass these around. These are very clearly racist propaganda. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a period of extreme social change in the U.S. Children were exposed to a range of mostly white middle-class responses to the racial crisis of the late 19th century and early 20th century in what R. Lawrence Rogers has called a peculiar instance of agreement for theorists of Darwinian evolution and biblical fundamentalism. Scientists and theologians in the late 19th century asserted evolutionary and scriptural evidence for the inferiority and underdevelopment of white people. Skipping ahead, it was not until 1955 that the tar baby story first became used by people in an offensive way, when Jet magazine first published a picture of an Uncle Remus impersonator at the Atlanta airport, deemed disgusting. Shortly after that, the film The Song of the South came out, which romanticized plantation life. The film certainly didn't shy away from Harris's paternalism, and the film's debut in Atlanta, which barred the star, James Baskett, from attending, added insult to injury. Disney's film adaptation of Harris's stories complicated the story's legacy. Let's see. Artists' renderings of the tar baby, a character that predated Harris in African American folklore but was popularized by him. Over the last century, the term tar baby has shifted from meaning a sticky situation to functioning as a racial slur, and the history of the tar baby illustration reflects America's shifting attitudes towards the term. In fact, one of the illustrators that Harris used for his books, for a second edition of the books, was E.W. Kimball, who also published a series called The Coon Alphabet, which was a series of alphabet-led had caricatures of African Americans enduring various torments that were meant to be comical. The Tar Baby was adapted to the late 1960s and reimagined, face conveniently obscured before the 1980s, before it finally occurs to anyone that the Tar Baby need not be drawn as a human child. Today, the Tar Baby continues to appear in advertising and marketing campaigns. It features prominently on the sign for a restaurant in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and has also been reproduced on bars of soaps sold by a purveyor of reproductions of racist historical imagery, old-time collectibles, which at the time of writing is going out of business. Unsurprisingly, Harris's popular characters were viewed as effective basis for advertising campaigns. Other ads target adults, such as, which uses Harris to invoke nostalgia, as one from advertising a train called Uncle Remus. This ad demonstrates some common trends in the early 20th century advertising that we can see echoed in other Uncle Remus-themed projects. The ad is presumably seeking investors for a cargo train that brings produce from the southern states to the north. The actual connection to the character is tenuous, but we are told that the Uncle Remus rushes produce to fastidious northern housewives, which firmly places the Uncle Remus train advertisement within the larger advertising trend that gave rise to Uncle Ben, Aunt Jemima, and the ubiquitous mammy imagery on household products in the first decades of the 20th century. Like these other advertising figures, Uncle Remus is here used as a friendly asexual surrogate servant, allowing northern white customers to imagine themselves head of a household wealthy enough to employ or own their own servants. And not just any servants, but servants who reminded the customer of a romanticized antebellum South where white housewives belonged to a leisure class with clear, racially demarcated dominion over the help, a fantasy that held wide appeal to the white northern customers who believed themselves economically displaced by the influx of 500,000 black southern laborers to northern industrial cities after World War I. In another article, and this will be much shorter, I promise, I was reading an interview with an author who wrote a book called The Tar Baby, and he did a lot of research about the origins of the Tar Baby in African culture, and not only just in African culture, but apparently the story goes into French and Italian culture as well, and in many adaptations it's not tar, it's gum paste and wax and whatnot. But he is asked, what about the story's long-standing association with racism? Is Tar Baby a racist term? He says, that last one is a complex question, but the short answer is yes. Some people, like William Safire and John McWhorter, have argued that the racism associated with the Tar Baby is a recent invention and that the term's original meaning was not about race. This is disproven by the fact that there are examples from the early 19th century where the term is already being used as a racial slur, specifically directed at African American children. Harris first published his first version of the Tar Baby story in the Atlanta Constitution at a time when the newspaper was using the term as a racial slur in its news articles. The term's racism is not incidental to the story. This is also confirmed by the fact that illustrations from early versions of the story represent the Tar Baby as having phenotypically African facial features. In complex ways, the story is about the history of racism, and for this reason, I don't think the term should be used in an offhand way as a figure of speech for any intractable situation. This usage is offensive, not least for its willful ignorance of the long history of suffering and exploitation that the story attempts in its own way to comprehend. And finally, I'd like to read a small part or talk about the story itself. And I don't want to steal Sandy's thunder because I know that she's going to talk about the Tar Baby story, but frankly, I don't think I could steal Sandy's thunder, so I'm going to go ahead and say what I have to say. In reading this story, I was struck by The many Google articles that came up when I did searches for this that referred to the story as being about a sticky situation, and I think that that is a gross misinterpretation of the literature. This is not the story of Pooh Bear getting his head stuck in a honey pot or getting chased by bees. That was a sticky situation, but Harris did not use honey or molasses or anything else. He used tar, and tar had a very specific use in those times. Tar and feathering was a way to kill somebody. You would tar and feather somebody, and then you would tie them up and leave them somewhere, and if they didn't wash it off, they would slowly suffocate as the tar dried. Tar traps were also made for slaves, wherein if they would pick fruit and they would get the tar on them, they would then later be whipped. So tar has a very, it's not metaphorical at all. It's very, very specific, and it meant danger. And even in talking about the story of Winnie the Pooh, you have to look at the moral of the story. I mean, obviously, in Winnie the Pooh's sin was greed. We all know that Winnie the Pooh's major featuring characteristic is greed, and that's why he keeps getting stuck places and whatever, and it's cute, but that's what we're supposed to get out of it. And in the story of Brer Rabbit, the reason why he gets stuck to the tar baby is because he is proud, and he is full of himself, and he's a little high and mighty. And so you have to ask yourself, in looking at this in the context in which it was written, which is these are stories about slave life and plantation life, and Brer Rabbit is the slave. That's what it is, and it's nothing else. Why would it be a problem for a black man to have pride? You know, what is this story really telling us about American history and about the culture in early America? And they're not cautionary tales for white children. They're cautionary tales for African American children, because white children didn't have to worry about those problems. And so I think that to take it out of the historical context is to grossly misinterpret, and to it's a misappropriation of the culture, is what it is. Just simply put, it's a common misappropriation. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Karen Jorg. I live at 112 South 10th Street. I recently have moved back to Salina. I was born and raised on a farm outside. Went to school in a small town, and at the edge of the small town, I remember reading, just when I was reading, at that age, about 8 or 9, nigger, don't let the sun fall on, set on your back in this town. I always wondered what that meant, and when I found out what it meant, I saved my nickels and allowance and became a member of the NAACP at the age of 9. So I've done a little research. I polled about 10 people and asked them what they thought of Tar Baby, and told them that you had mentioned it. And most of them go, oh, he said what? You know, it was they knew what it meant. Only one person didn't know what it meant, and actually it was an African American who didn't know what it meant, so I thought it was kind of funny. But I think we've schooled you today, and as a mayor of a hopefully progressive town, you need to be more conscious of your words, and you can't draw back your words once they're spoken. You can't take them back. And I think basically that what people want is a public apology and an admittance of ignorance of the fact that it was, which you just did a few minutes ago. So I think that I think you've done what you need to do. Maybe something in the paper might be nice, but other than that, all I can say is go and sin no more. Thank you.
Others that would like to address to the commission?
Norman Mammal Salina. This goes back a long, long time, folks. We need to find out what the source maybe has caused this problem. This goes back to the time of biblical times. If you go looking into your Old Testament, Leviticus, Exodus, it says if you're Jewish or Christian, you may take slaves of the pagan nations. Look it up, folks. So this isn't a new phenomenon, but the thing of it is, how are we going to stop it? If you want to cure disease, get rid of it. So where are them words coming from? So this isn't just a 100-year-old problem, a 200-year-old problem, a 500-year-old problem. The Native Americans had the same problem when the white man intruded this land. They called the Native Americans heathens, savages. It's recorded. You need to read some of this history. So this problem isn't just new, but everybody makes a speech, but nobody seems to go, well, how did this problem start? Where did it come from? Better go back a couple thousand years. So you're going to have to get rid of something before you can cure it. Because that's where it's coming from. So everybody talks about it, but nobody wants to put their finger on it and see, well, what are we going to do to get rid of it? So look back in history a couple thousand years. This goes back into the time of the Bibles.
Thank you. Ms. Beverly?
Good afternoon. My name is Sandy Beverly. I live at 141 South Clark. I'm a recent retiree from the city of Salina. Brian Frazier, who spoke earlier, is my brother. Trent Davis and John Blanchard are personal friends. I have a lot of friends in this room. I went to high school with Carl. As far as I know, we've never had a crossword, have we?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. So with all that being said, and there's a lot of things that have been said already, I just want you to know that your choice of the use of the language that conjured up all sort of unpleasant things in the images of everyone that I've spoken to were uncalled for, unnecessary, unneeded. The term tar baby is not universal the way you believe it. It's not a term of endearment. Furthermore, by explaining that that term was applied to you as a child when you misbehaved did nothing but reinforce an image of subtle racism. I have to wonder how comfortable you would have felt using that term if there had been more dark-complected people in that audience that day. If the comment coming from your mouth caused you to question yourself, perhaps you should have said something then. We all have an opportunity to learn. We all make mistakes. I may have grown up saying and doing a lot of things that I no longer do because I've learned better. We all have that opportunity each and every day. As a storyteller, I also have to comment that never in my 25 years of telling stories have I heard that Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, or the Tar Baby stories had anything to do with the weak and the strong, the trickster tales. I've told these stories in public schools, and I give the history of why they're told. I must also comment that in the literature that I grew up with and the research I've done, that view is never presented as an element in any of those stories. I realize art is subjective, but that explanation is inaccurate. I'm representing no one's opinion here but my own. No individual has the right to tell me how to feel about something that I perceive as a wrongdoing. Having one relative, knowing a person that is culturally, ethnically different, or of a different ability or disability, LGBTQ, different belief system, economically disadvantaged, different nationality, different gender, or reading about anything doesn't give you carte blanche to say what you don't know anything about. When you step on someone's neck, have the grace to apologize with compassion and not excuses.
I was a little late to get here. Some of y'all know me, some of you don't.
My name is Willie Isom. The first time I set foot in this town was in November 1966. And some people here will know that there was a sign out there on 9th Street out there that said, "Welcome to Salina, the city on the move. Population 46,200 or 300. It is now 2018. Population 47,200. The problem with Salina is something these people right here never said anything about it. It has been pretty much, as everybody describes it, a lily white city. There is no representation of the variety of people that live in this town. You can see it in the courthouse, the city commissioners. We have one black doctor. We have no black lawyers. We have nothing except this. So what's said and what's done in this town is something that's been carried on for 50 years. It's nothing new. It's nothing started. It's always been there. And the only way this place is going to ever change is for the population increase, diversity, and people that's surrounded by people that they feel comfortable with and not people that they look down on. We have the same problem with water parks. No person over there has got him a marriage, no management skills. They got a bunch of teenagers over there and a bunch of little old high school kids. There's nobody to handle a crisis when something happened over there. And when something happened over there, instead of them doing it the right way, they just cover it up and rubber stamp it. So if Salina, Kansas want to ever get out of this quagmire they're in, they're going to have to start completely revamping the whole system. It's time to get rid of all these old and bring in the new. Because we don't, 50 years from now, they'll be standing here with the same problem. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to address the commission?
My name is Jonathan King. I kind of got a wing disc because I'm not able to say what I wanted to. But I will say that the term tar baby, myself, and if you follow Facebook or anybody in the community, nobody believes it was an accident. Nobody believes that it was a misspoken of words. Racism, really, there's no apology. I know people have asked for your apology, but there is really none. Mr. Isom did say the truth. Salina has no representation of diversity, really, and we're a very diverse town. A lot of people want to throw in the Bible. The Bible says love everybody. It also says don't be sitting there calling people names. You have a lot of stuff that goes on in this town that goes just hidden, covered up for whatever reason, I don't know. I am glad, though, as a black male, that it looks like some people are holding you accountable. I will say, for myself, I think you really should step down. Racism is no point in the government. You make the laws. You showed how you felt. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to address this matter or any other?
Hi, my name is James Talley. I live at 422 South 9th Street. I don't imagine that anybody in front of me is having a whole lot of fun here today. I don't view this as sort of a public ritual of shaming, and I actually kind of resent the fact that many of us felt that we had to show up here today. I'm sure you're not terribly comfortable at the moment, Mr. Mayor. I also noticed that we're not really getting a whole lot of city business done today. And, of course, we will hear about that on various social media, that we're all oversensitive, we're all too uptight, we pick on innocent words and make a big deal out of it. Well, a big deal is in the eye of the beholder, and whether your remark was innocent or not, that speaks to what you claim your intention was. I think it's obvious from what we've heard today that intention is not the issue, impact is the issue. You have upset to put it very mildly, many people in this community. And what was published in the newspaper yesterday, day before, only compounded the error. I'm white. I've been white my whole life. As such, I participate in racism whether I realize it or not. And if that statement doesn't make any sense whatsoever to you, I encourage you to read more. It's a fairly safe way to start learning about things because you can do it in the privacy of your own home without cameras and microphones and recordings and other people around. I'm a big advocate of that sort of thing. You have to ask yourself the question, is the point today that a whole bunch of people don't like you and so they came here to take some sort of advantage of a slip of the tongue that you made in order to embarrass you publicly? Or is this something that maybe should call you to a new curriculum? If you did not know this ahead of time, the history of the term, the history of the film, the history of the images that Aaron brought up, I don't particularly fault you. There are a million loaded images, terms that we have inherited from our very troubled past. And from my point of view, the issue is not whether or not one of those bubbled up to your consciousness and came out of your mouth the other day. It is how you have reacted since then. Self-defense is not the issue. Your intentions are not the issue. Your goodwill and your background are not the issue. The issue is you represent a community of 50,000 people. Many of them don't look like you. Virtually none of them have precisely the same general sets of experiences that you have. If you are going to meaningfully represent this community, throw no one under the bus, ignore no one's voices, then your job as a public servant is to learn as much as you possibly can about the perspectives, the issues, the concerns, the language choices that are okay and not okay of all those different constituencies. That you didn't know it is understandable, perhaps, is forgivable, perhaps. That you followed every single strategy of self-protection in your statement to the newspaper in the wake of this incident tells me that you want it to go away. You want to tell everybody you're not a bad person. I don't care if you're a bad person. You're a public official, and until you step down or are removed, you will continue to exert power and present an image of this community to the wider world. You will also present an image to the people in different constituencies, and that image will be primarily, do you belong in this space? As a previous speaker brought up, this is a very white space. Black people have a history of, let us say, euphemistically, not feeling like they belong in white spaces. You can't do anything about your skin color. You can't do anything about your own upbringing and socialization. But you can broaden your horizon and take this as a very strong hint that you should expand your learning seriously and for the rest of your life. Insofar as I continue to carry around racist baggage of my own through my own socialization in a white and white supremacist culture, so do you. And if you are non-racist, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. I want you to be anti-racist, and that means an active commitment to learning to do better, to making these mistakes less often. And when you do make a mistake, as we all do, be sincere. Open your ears. Listen to the pain that you have inflicted on other people, and do not try to minimize it. Do not try to rationalize it. Take it, sit with it, and try to do better in the future through an active pursuit of better understanding of what you've been given, what you've taken for granted, and what other people have been through. This has been no fun. And if the only lesson that anybody takes from today is, oh, well, tar baby, let's add that to the list of things that we in public life cannot say, then everybody here has wasted their time. If we come back again in 6 months because you or someone else or in this body or another body has once again, slipped up and made some racially loaded comment, we're all going to be wasting our times doing the same thing. The issue is not the word you used. I don't even think necessarily the issue is your immediate reaction. I am concerned about your later reaction that was quoted in the newspaper. These things indicate to me that you want this to be over. You want to defend yourself as a decent person. And to me, that is not the issue. To me, the issue is whether you, as a leader of this community, are willing to do the lifelong and difficult, uncomfortable work of trying to understand where everybody else is coming from. If you are, victory. And if you make a slip in the future and you know how to properly address that, great. If not, if you're not willing to do this work, we're going to be back here with you or with someone else, and we're going to be wasting our time and the commission's time carping over a particular set of letters put in, close contact with one another. What's really important here is breaking out of your own framework for viewing the world. It is about making a welcoming community, a community where everyone feels like they belong. I shudder to think about any person of color wanting to bring before this body today or in the future an issue of justice, an issue of grievance, and believing that they will get a completely fair and objective hearing. I believe that the incident with Jim Guile and the County Commission 5 years ago pretty much put the last nail in the coffin for the city or for the County Commission on that same basis. What you say, what you do, you can make mistakes. How you proceed after you have made those mistakes speaks to your character, speaks to what you believe it means to represent all of the citizens of Salina. And I urge you, when the cameras are off and everybody's gone home, to just examine your conscience on this matter. There are people who will help you as they have helped me to learn more and to do better every day. We're all going to mess up. The more you have a track record of trying to do the right thing and trying always to improve your understanding, the less people are going to jump down your throat when you do mess up. I would hope that that is what you take away from today, in addition to all the very specific, informative. I mean, folks did their homework, whether they knew that term to begin with, knew it accurately or not. There's a lot of unpaid labor going on in this room now, and there's been going on the last several days. Please don't insult that by declaring this matter over and done with when we all go home and the controversy dies down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Others that would like to speak to this issue?
If I could speak to this and then resume the public forum, just so that the topics don't get crossed. I've been sitting here feeling about 75 eyes on me, saying, well, there's one black guy sitting up there. I guess he's going to say something. And my second sentence was that I was going to warn you that probably was not going to satisfy you with what I was going to say. But after what was just said, I'm not going to read this. I can't improve upon what was just said. And I hope everything that you said can be printed verbatim, because everyone in town, everyone in every town needs to read that. I'm going to take issue with you over one item, though. This is city business. This city is no more than the people who live in it. And if we're going to progress and thrive as a city, just like any family, we have to have moments where we can talk openly, sometimes chastise, always learn, but always do it with a sense of compassion and love. Otherwise, this city will not flourish. And that population won't be the same 50 years from now. It'll be zero. So I just want to thank you for your comments. It is very hard when you look at the thousands of times that we have to open our mouths up here on this dais, and it's hard enough to try to figure out what it is that we want to say. It gets very hard to say it the right way sometimes. And all of us have been in situations where, as a parent, teacher, preacher, whatever, you had the right thought, but boy, it just didn't come out the way it should have. And you can't take words back. Probably Roseanne Barr is a great example of that right now. Boy, if I had thought about that just 30 seconds longer, probably would have figured it wasn't a good thing to say. But we don't get those opportunities in real life. I don't believe for a minute that Mayor Ryan uttered those words with an intent to have a racially or bigotry motive behind them. Still, nonetheless, there are words that in this country, like many phrases that we use to describe Asian and other enemies of this country during wars, we've had to remove from our literature. It gets hard, but these are the type soul-searching sessions that we have to have. I think it's a good gut check for all of us to think about how we present ourselves to others. I just want to thank you for your words. Thank you.
I would like to read a brief statement on behalf of myself, if that's all right. First of all, I just want to let you all know, all citizens of all color, all backgrounds, that I take my lead from you. And I'm going to put this out there. I've asked it on social media, and I'm going to ask it again here today. What's the best path forward for all of us? What's the first step in repairing the damage that we have done through a poor choice of words? But you shouldn't let the rest of us off the hook here. There was a lack of response in the moment on all of our behalf. We've often spoken of the need for unity, and I just want to ask a few questions. Does acknowledging other people's viewpoints enhance or threaten unity? Does taking ownership for causing pain, deliberately or inadvertently, enhance or threaten unity? Does simply saying, "I'm sorry, how can we make this right and move forward together," enhance or threaten unity? I'm sorry for my lack of response when I heard the term tar baby uttered. My silence implied agreement. In hindsight, there were several ways I could have handled it better. I ask not only for your suggestions in moving forward, but also for your forgiveness and for the chance to do a better job in representing all Salinans. Thank you.
Are there others that would like to comment? Mr.
I would.
Talley?
I do have one comment. First thing I did is, first of all, the term that Mayor Ryan used was in hindsight inappropriate. But the first thing I did after I left is I looked up the term tar baby. I grew up in an ethically diverse community, played ball with many blacks, and had never heard the term tar baby used as a racial slur. I appreciate called the young lady, the second lady to talk. I think with age comes wisdom, and I think, as she stated, as we grow, we need to learn. And I believe this is a learning opportunity for this commission and for this community. Again, I do not believe there was anything racially motivated about it. I think Mayor Ryan was caught off guard after he had said it. I did hear him, in a gentlemanly manner, ask Commissioner Davis, he says, "I hope I did not offend you," because he did not mean anything by it. And hopefully we'll move forward. Again, I hope we can understand that we all come from different backgrounds. And whether Mayor Ryan was giving it an excuse for what he said. I do believe he gave a reason for why he said that. We all do have different backgrounds. Different words mean different things to different people. And again, we appreciate your comments. I think we can learn from this. Let's move forward as a community. We need to not become divisive. We need to become more cohesive as a community if we do want to grow past that 47, 48, 49,000 population. So again, thank you for attending the meeting today, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, Mr. Talley, I've taken your remarks to heart, and I appreciated the things you said. I think you were right on in your comments. I'm sorry, my ignorance and it's a blind spot, I would call this, in my knowledge, and I've certainly learned from the experience, and I will continue to try to learn. Other matters for the public forum, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you. This is a little different topic. I'm John Devine. I live at 1748 Glen. Commissioner Davis and I had a conversation last week, and he asked if I would share. As many of you know, I work with a lot of cities around the state. This issue has come up a lot, and I know it was on your discussion last week. The two big issues that come about from this, and I think you may hear this from somebody else. Somebody walked in the door and walked up to the dais and didn't say anything and interrupted you. That would be considered pretty inappropriate. What we're finding out is most of us do not have the skill. The minute I look down, my attention is lost. Whether it's for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, when I look down, I miss that. What it does, and today kind of showed, the two big issues with all of the communities I work with is, one, when I'm using my phone, and it's changing because we now have tablets but it's telling the individual that I don't respect them. Think about if you went to your doctor, your dentist, or your banker, and in the middle of your examination or your middle of your discussion, they looked at your phone, how much would you think they really cared about you? And as some of you know, my prejudice is I don't think there's anybody in the city that cares any more about the citizens than the five of you. Our city commissioners in this community care a great deal about the citizens. And the minute that you start letting this as an interruption, and then the other issue that comes up is an awful lot of the time, especially for elected officials, as we've heard in the conversation today, perception is more real than the truth, because we all interpret our truth differently. And so, as Mr. Commissioner Davis and I were talking about, and I mentioned, I just wanted to share with you some thoughts. It's awfully hard today, but one of the things you can do is if you need to look up information, you can, transparency is something we all talk about. So say to your commissioners, I'm going to, in a sense, mentally step away for a few seconds because something was just brought up that doesn't make sense, and I need more information on it. So, yeah, we're not going to take a formal break, but I want you to know what I'm doing. Or I'm, citizen, Mr. or Mrs. Citizen, it's not that I don't respect you. I want to be better prepared to work with you. But tell me that you're going to use it. I brought mine in today. I usually leave mine in the car when I go places because I know I'm not, and I haven't used it very much, and yet I'm not very disciplined. If this phone goes off, and I probably ought to turn it off right now, but if the phone goes off, I'm going to look at it. And yet, at the same time, if somebody walked in the door and yelled, you'd look at them, and you'd be very concerned, and in a sense, it would be very disrespectful of them and you. And so just wanted to share those thoughts with you, that as you go through your conversation about where does this thing fit in our operation today, and if you're looking and saying, I can't do 2 hours without this, then look and think about, as the comments were made today about how do we take Salina to another place? Will we take it to another place by caring and sharing and being very respectful of our citizens? And I'm dealing, like I said, I'm dealing with this in a number of cities today. This is an issue that has come up at almost every city commission, so you're not alone. But most of them are stepping back and realizing that the perception of what we're doing, rather than maybe sometimes, and we may say there's a real purpose, but the perception is you don't care what I'm saying. When you look down at that phone, even if it's just for 2 or 3 seconds, I'm wondering, do you hear what I'm saying? So just wanted to share that and appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Devine. Other remarks?
This is democracy tonight in action. I think that's great, though, and human relations in action, I have to say. I've come here for another reason, different subject, but I want to congratulate folks for coming out because I think that's really important that you let people know how you feel. I looked out here many times to see an empty room, and it's much better when there's people here. That's what it's about. I wanted to say I agree with Mayor Devine regarding cell phone usage. I think it does go to wrongful perception by the public. And I also wanted to clarify something else that was brought up last week at the podium, that my phone had rang a couple of times when I was mayor. And I want to clarify that because it did. It didn't ring, it vibrated. At that time, my husband was at Holiday Resort, and I was worrying about him. So I understand what Commissioner Hodges is saying about her son. We're the nurturers of the world, and that's what we do. It's what we do best. And but I wanted to clarify that. Yes, it did ring a couple times. The other thing that I wanted to come today, mainly what I wanted to come for, was to congratulate you all for appointing Michael Scragg as interim city manager. I also want to express how fortunate that we have been in Salina to have had such a good management team. And I don't think we realize how lucky we are. We've had Jason Gage as city manager for, 13 years? And Mike as deputy city manager, not quite that long, 10 years? 12 and a half years. And I came to ask you to give serious consideration to hiring Mr. Scragg as our city manager. I feel I'm pretty well qualified to ask you to do that since I worked with Mike Scragg in my elected position, of course, as you are, as city commissioner and mayor. But I also spent several years working with him when I was on executive staff, and he was in his current position. So I've seen him also from employer position. I know him to be a man of moral leadership and intellectual honesty. I can think of nothing more needed right now in this country than leaders who are family-oriented and have moral integrity. It's been said that a nation is only as good as a sum of its parts. Well, Salina is a sum of the part. It's a part of the nation. And I believe it would be a missed opportunity, along with an unnecessary expenditure of city funds, to go out on a nationwide search, pay someone to come travel here when we already have someone elected and educated, not elected, excuse me, but educated in city administration, who is ethical, moral, and more than qualified for the job. I think the thing of it is we don't get to know him. He sits over there behind Jason. Get to know him. Mike has worked in city administration for many years, and several before he came here. He was raised in Iowa, a culture very much like our home. He was recruited by another city at one time, and we were lucky enough to keep him. We nearly lost him that time because he was recruited by another city. He and Jason worked very hard on our downtown project, so Mike knows that project very well, which is important to our citizens. He spent many hours, and I sat in study session, as some of you did. Some of you weren't here yet, but sat in there and watched him put the figures together for the star bonds and the CIDs and put it up on a spreadsheet so we could all look at it. He's worked very well with Jason, and although we will all miss Jason a lot and we wish him the best, I believe Mike will work well into the job as city manager and has stood in place of Jason on several occasions too when Jason was gone, different times. So I just brought that to you, and I want you to at least encourage you to think about that very seriously. And thank you very much. Now you can do the business of the city.
Thank you. That concludes public comments. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Could we have the consent agenda, please?
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of June 25th, 2018. Item 6.2, adopt resolution number 18-7567, authorizing access to the municipal investment pool account for the Pooled Money Investment Board. Item 6.3, adopt resolution number 18-7568, authorizing an agreement with USD 305, assigning 3 uniformed law enforcement officers to serve in the School Resource Officer Program. Item 6.4, adopt resolution number 18-7569, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement between the City of Salina and Meishauser and Company, certified public accountants, for an audit of city records for the year ending December 31st, 2017. And item 6.5, approve change order number 3 for the 2016 water main replacement project, project number 63150, to Stevens Contractors Incorporated of Salina, Kansas, in the amount of $96,483.20, and revise the contract time for final completion from November 9th, 2017 to December 14th, 2017.
Are there any items that any commissioner would like to remove from the consent agenda for discussion? Is there a motion to?
I'm sorry, I do have 2 items, 6.3 and 6.4, that I would like to remove from the consent agenda.
Are there other items? Is there a motion to approve 6.1, 6.2, and 6.5?
So moved.
Second.
We moved and seconded that we'll approve 6.1, 6.2, and 6.5. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items pass 5-0. 6.3.
All right. This item basically is talking about our supporting school resource officer staffing to the school in the past. Just to summarize, for folks at home who may not have the benefit of having this, and I don't know if Captain Sweeney would like to maybe give us a quick summary. Probably can do it better than I can. So why don't you go ahead and...
I'm Captain Sweeney, and I'm with the Salina Police Department. I'm the support commander, which includes the USD 305. And each year we supply school resource officers to the public schools, which is Central High School, South High School, Lakewood Middle School, and then South Junior High School. Each of the officers are specifically trained to encounter the students, and our primary duty is enforcement of criminal laws. But then also we do help the schools as far as helping and support counseling of kids, and it's a good thing to have the officers go one-on-one with the students so they feel more comfortable with the officers and so forth. And we have a contract with the schools, as far as they pay for the officers, and we reach an agreement on the amounts. And unfortunately, due to staffing concerns, we usually supply an officer for each of the high schools and the 2 middle schools, but at this point we could only afford 3 school resource officers. And until we get enough staffing, we're going to continue this until we do want to put a 4th SRO officer.
And that right there, Captain Sweeney, was you led in brilliantly, because that was going to be my next question. In the past, we have provided 4
Yes.
school resource officers.
Yes.
Do we know which schools are going to receive the school resource officers and which one will not, or?
The high schools are going to have a full-time SRO officer, but the middle school, the officer's going to go between the 2 middle schools. So if there's issues over at South Middle School, they'll go there, or they'll go to Lakewood School. But then also he tries to divide his time up to where it's equal in both schools.
And you feel comfortable that our present staffing levels allow us to supply the 3 school resource officers?
Yes.
At this time?
At this point, yes.
I think my other questions would then either be for Chief Nelson or for Mr. Gage. When I see that school resource officer staffing is being affected, it does beg the question, what is our present staffing level, and what do we need to be at before we can provide the 4th school resource officer?
I don't know if there's a magic number, but I can say that we went down to 3. I think I'd been here 1 year, was when we just had to. The numbers were getting so light. That's why we did it. So for the past 3 years, we've been doing the same thing, sharing the middle school officer. So it's not just this year. We've had the one in each high school, and then shared the middle schools. Do I have a magic number? I've always liked 80. I mean, if we can get to 80.
What's fully?
84.
You're funded for 84.
84,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and 80 was just, I think we'd just be ecstatic if we get to 80, and I don't know how happy we'd be if we get to 84, but I'm just saying 80 was a number. If you're asking for a number, that's when I feel we can make some promotions we need to, fully staff the SRO staff. That's what we're trying to get to, and we've been trying for years.
Right. Where are we at presently on staffing?
I believe it's 73 today.
Okay. I guess that something that I would like to request, either included in the city manager's report or provided, at least to me, I don't know if the rest of the commission is interested in seeing it, is I would like confirmation of the staffing level, any additional information you have on the retention rate, and that would include, I think, more a request of city staff, update on our retention and wage study that we had been working on in the past, when that's going to be finished and available, when we're going to have the information on that. I'm not asking for it now, but I would like to have that information updated so that we know just what kinds of ramifications it has in the various programs that we staff. So thank you very much. I'm very hopeful we get up to 80, because I'd really love to see an SRO in each one of the schools. I think you guys are a very valuable resource, and it's wonderful to get the students familiar with law enforcement on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to during a time of crisis. So, thank you.
I would agree. I think it's one of the better programs we've had in the nation since I've been a police officer, so I definitely agree, and I truly want to get to 4.
Thank you very much.
6.4?
Do we want to act individually on 6.3 and then go to, I don't know how that works.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we should. Is there a motion to approve 6.3?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that passes 5-0. 6.4. Any questions?
I do. 6.4 is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement between the City of Salina and Mize Hauser and Company, certified public accountants, for an audit of city records for the year ending December 31st, 2017. So, at any rate, that's our blue sheet. Just a few questions, Ms. Pack. What's our typical audit timeline?
Typically, it's anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and that's normal in any city. I've been in government finance before, and typically it's about a 4 to 6 month prep and finish time.
Gotcha.
We're on a elevated timeline for this one, though, because we know we're already behind with the 16. We're turning around the 17 in hopes to get it done by fall for our debt issuance.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And the status of the 2016 audit, are we in the middle of that at the present
No,
time?
we've completed the actual audit work.
Okay.
We're in the process now of wrapping up as you know, there's a pretty extensive document that comes out, the annual report that comes out with that audit. We're in the process now of getting that report put together. We have some outside entities that we have to include their financials also, so we're waiting on a couple of those. And we're trying to wrap up just some of that documentation at this point.
Gotcha. And once that's received, just for anybody who has any out there who has any interest, the city does have that information, once it's available, posted on our Laserfiche. So I can get you hooked up with how to access that, as can any of our staff members.
I believe it's also online on the website.
Right. Okay. I also had a question about the funding coming from the Water and Sewer Fund. Is that something that is typically, and I don't know if that's a Mr. Gage question or a Ms. Pack question, whether we typically fund our audits from water and sewer?
You typically fund your audit from the funds that it's providing services back to. So and I have to talk to Debbie about this, but generally speaking, you'd represent the general fund, the utility funds, and that type of thing in a kind of a prorated way, and then you would fund it that way.
And from what I've seen historically from looking at it, the city of Salina has done that, split it between the two funds.
Okay. Okay. Couple further questions. I understand that the auditing process does usually include the auditor selecting members of the governing body, inquiring about any irregularities that they may have observed, things like that. And I guess my question to you, and maybe it's something that I should be asking Mize Hauser, is how are those selections typically made? I know that when I first came on the commission, I did get an auditor call. And I probably wasn't very helpful, because I think I'd only been on the commission a few months at that point. Because I think that where I'm coming from is I would like to be proactive, and if I have concerns of my own, how do I either ask to be one of those contacted, or how am I allowed to contact the auditing company?
Sure. I know from an audit perspective, they will randomly select, and they do it for us too. They have multiple questionnaires that they send out to staff, they send it out to IT, they send it out to administration, and a lot of different people within the organization. I'm not the auditor, so I don't know how they specifically select, but I can certainly pass that information along, and anytime they're available, I would assume you have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And the reason I ask about that was last week we approved a retroactive increase of the city manager's spending authority, and that was over $100,000 in the excess for animal care that we needed to authorize. And I guess that I'm still mulling that over, and as I think about it, I think it would be really important to help reestablish trust, not only among the citizens, but at least for this member of the governing body, that it's not included already. How can we go about ensuring that we have an audit that does include a specific examination of the city manager's office for the spending that is the purchasing that is done up to the $20,000 spending
Yeah.
limit.
Commissioner, let me give you clarification on that, because the spending didn't come from the city manager's office. The spending came from another function in the organization. I think you're pretty sure of that. So in this particular case, it's not really a process issue, and that's as much as I'm going to be able to say in a public setting, unless you want to go into executive session and speak further. The spending issue was brought to my attention, and when I saw that, I realized that the expenditure amount was beyond the authority you give me that applies for an individual type purchase, or in this type an aggregate. My authority extends to the organization. It can't be exceeded by anyone in the organization, and shouldn't have been. And so when it was, and it was brought to my attention, we have a lot of other questions we're asking about that, obviously, with regards to process and decisions that were made. But in that case, we said, I'm not going to, transparency is a pretty big thing, and so I felt it was very important to be able to disclose that to you, and also for you to take action and to authorize it. So that's, and so we'll look at that. But we've looked, our processes are very good with regards to spending. Our system is very good. And quite honestly, I'm going to step away from the situation that you spoke to and just speak more generally towards purchasing and things that happen in large organizations. And generally speaking, even really good processes won't always catch an expenditure or two that perhaps should not have been made. And there's a lot of gray behind those sometimes. But it will eventually catch a pattern of that, and that's really what the auditors are typically after, is if there's a pattern of spending, and it will generally catch that, and there are ways you do that.
Well, and I guess I don't, maybe this would be a request then, if I'm going to continue down this path, that we do make a recess into executive session, because be that as it may, and we can throw a particular department under the bus, if we want to or not, but at some point, there's an element of oversight involved, and if we need to talk about that in executive session, I'm absolutely fine with that, but I am also making the specific request that when the audit is done, and if I need to make it directly to whatever. Meisenhauser, that's fine, but I think that given the circumstances of last week, it would definitely be in our best interest to make, and in the interest of transparency, to make sure that this is a one-time occurrence, and it's not something that's been happening with any kind of regularity.
And from my experience, I will say that all auditing firms do some testing of all systems. But obviously, they cannot test every single item that goes through. So they're looking for those red flags, they're looking for those patterns, they're looking for those specific larger amounts or something like that. So they do look at, do we have the things in place that we say we should have in place in order to get through that audit information. So they pull accounts payable, they pull payroll, they pull anything else that we're doing to make sure that they can test some of those items. Will they catch them all? Probably not.
Right.
But I will again say too that if they see a situation like this, they typically read our minutes and our agendas and our things like that. That's part of the process they go through to kind of learn about our process. So if they see something like that, I would venture to guess that they're going to be looking at that a little bit more specifically.
Gotcha. So they're not only looking at, say, like an overall institutional control issues, but also for detailed things.
Yes.
Like making sure that like aggregate spending doesn't, matches up and all that sort of stuff, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Well, they're not going to look, it's going to be hard to find that ABC company was paid 14 times in a 12-month period, and that amount of money may have gone over. But what they're going to be looking for is did we have a purchase order with that person? Did that amount go over what we have approved in commission? If I come to you and I get an approval for this particular agreement, they're going to look to see that I didn't overspend what I was approved to do. And that's part of auditing.
Gotcha. Last couple of questions. When should we expect to see the 2018 budget certification paperwork online?
2018?
Yeah, it looked like that typically submitted, or at least the other ones were submitted like in the fall of the previous year.
The 18 budget book should be online already.
Okay.
We completed that earlier this year.
Right, and you got me a copy, and I
Right.
really do appreciate
If
that.
it's not online, I'll double check.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner, I would like a clarification. You made a reference to throw someone under the bus, throw a department under the bus. What did you mean by that?
What I meant was that it would make me very comfortable if we could have some kind of, I think that it would be fair to say that no one up here and no one in your seat, no one out there was really happy with the way that the whole animal seizure and then return process went. And I would love to have an outside audit of that process, top to bottom, because I think it's unfair to you. I think it's unfair to the staff below you to try to do that in-house.
That didn't answer my question.
I don't want to see, my sense is in some of the communications that we've had, which I'll be happy to make available, that the intent at this point looks to be that Animal Services is going to be taking a great deal of heat on this subject.
And you feel that you've made a decision on a personnel issue, then you feel that that should not occur, even though you just asked us to make sure this doesn't happen again?
I'm asking to have an audit done. I'm also asking, I'd love to have an outside audit come through and take a look at our processes top to bottom, because you referenced processes and how those processes work. But if we're in the middle of it, and certainly stop me, Greg, anytime that we need to talk about personnel. I'm relying on you to give us the high sign on when we need to do that. But I would like to see a thorough audit.
Well, I just want to make sure it appears you have a position on a personnel issue. I didn't bring the personnel issue up, nor did I indicate Animal Services.
I don't have any position whatsoever on a personnel issue. I have my impressions from communications that I've gotten from you that indicate that there is a determination that has been made by you, and that's absolutely your job as city manager. Our job as the governing body is to go ahead and take a larger view of that and make sure that everything's aligning, not just at the front lines, but all the way to the top.
Absolutely. I just, real quick, in case for those who may not know what the phrase throw someone under the bus means, you can look it up, you'll get variations, but a quick definition is it's an idiomatic phrase in American English meaning to betray a friend or ally for selfish reasons. In this case, maybe to betray a department for selfish reasons. It is typically used to describe a self-defensive disavowal and severance of previously friendly relationship when the relation becomes controversial or unpopular. And here's the thing. When we have a situation in which we have potentially, I say potentially because until you staff through it, you don't know if a rule's been violated, whether it's a purchasing rule, disciplinary rule, or any type of rule. I'm speaking in general to all situations in the organization. The first thing is a city manager, statutorily and in your codes, it's your expectation that I address that, which means that I make sure that it doesn't happen again. So I'm really confused when I heard the phrase throw a department under the bus, and yet I also heard to make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm wondering what you would like my role to be.
Well, I think we've all learned today that words have power, and they must be carefully considered. And maybe throw someone under the bus was maybe not the best phrase I could have chosen, and I'm more than happy to own it in the moment. And however, that being said, I have concerns. I'm telling you right now, I'm telling you in front of everyone, I have concerns. It's not appropriate to discuss personnel, non-elected personnel, in this audience. I'm not going any further. If we want to discuss it further, we can either take it to an executive session or pursue this, after the meeting. I think an auditing of this process is absolutely needed, and I think that making sure that our auditors understand that we've had issues in the past, I think that's very important.
Okay. I just need to be sure that you're committed, that you would like me in my role to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, see, that's exactly the kind of loaded question and comment that I'm talking about. You say you want me to make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's what you said.
How am I supposed to take that? As a threat to staff?
No, I just want to be sure
because I mean, just in the moment, that's how I'm taking it.
You sent 2 messages. I heard a message that said, hey, for some reason, I already disagree with what I think that you think, without, my opinion, without basis for that, because I don't yet know what I think. There's a way of determining that. So you're a step ahead of me on that issue, and I don't quite know why, but when I heard throw a department under the bus, and then I heard make sure it doesn't happen again, that's confusing to me. I'm just being upfront with you. It's very confusing. And I'm not talking in code language. When you say make sure it doesn't happen again, I'm pretty comfortable with the processes that are looked at by our auditor each year. They look at processes. They look at internal processes and care of and handling of funds and all those types of things. So I'm pretty comfortable with those. It doesn't mean that they're perfect. It never means that they're perfect. So the point is there are a lot of ways to determine or to make sure something doesn't happen again. I just want to be sure I'm not confused, that you're comfortable with me looking at this issue to try to make sure, whether it's process, whatever it is, it doesn't happen again.
And I think I'm saying that rather than that option, because I feel like it, as I've said previously just a few minutes ago, when you've got, I would liken it to, I think I'm going to get right on into non-elected personnel here. So
the only reason I ask is because you made that statement. I'm just trying to figure out which statement.
Okay, first statement, and I thought I clarified that, but maybe I did not. I would like to have the auditor pay special attention to examine the discretionary spending, the spending up to $20,000 a year, or on various things within the audit. I'm also making a request for an outside audit of how this process occurred. I think the easiest thing, and maybe a sports analogy would do, but throughout the whole process, I just kept coming back to when you get that investigation term from the NCAA, a lack of institutional control, and I'm just not sure. When the NCAA is investigating the University of Kansas, for example, my beloved Jayhawks, does the University of Kansas conduct the investigation, or does a third party handle that investigation, or is it a combination of both? But no matter where you sit, I don't think any of us were particularly pleased with how that process worked out.
I think a key word in this is the word "we," and all due respect, Commissioner, this is something you want to pursue, but I have confidence in our city manager and in him getting to the bottom of these things, finding the solution for us. I don't think there's any need for any type of outside audit. My confidence is with
my question
Mr.
is,
Gage.
that's why we hire a third party to do the audit. Am I not correct? That they look at procedures and all that. To hire another accounting firm on top of them, I'm not sure why we would do that. That's why we hire a third party.
I think that this would be a completely separate deal.
Just on this one case?
And not necessarily in accounting.
I would think that you could bring this up under other business for a future meeting. I don't think any of this has anything to do with this actual resolution.
Thank you.
So if we could move on to action on this, appreciate it.
Are you ready for a motion?
I am. We can take public comment on this. Mr. Blanchard?
Hello, my name is John Blanchard. I live at 1117 State Street. I think you exhibit a little bit of hostility there, and I don't know what that came from, but I would invite you, because I was here last week. And I also noticed that you were very quick to look up what throw somebody under the bus is, but last week you weren't very quick to look under what Tar Baby was. But let me just get past that for a minute. But let me just invite you to do something, and then I'll sit down. Let me invite you to go back and watch the video from last week's meeting. And I'm not going to be able to quote exactly what you said, but you sat right there and you said, "It's not my style to throw people under the bus."
That's right.
So you want to talk
That's
about
exactly
where
right.
that phrase came from? She didn't bring it up, you did.
Right.
So, okay.
Yeah, I asked, real quick, Mr. Blanchard, first of all, you have no idea what I looked up when that conversation went on last week, so it's not appropriate for you to even address it.
No, I did notice that, like the rest of them, you sat silent.
I looked it up.
And you looked this one up, but you sure as heck were sure to fire back at her what it meant.
No, her context was that I threw a department under the bus. It wasn't about the general phrase. It was about the intent of the comment, along with the confusing comment of make sure it doesn't happen again. I think that prompts the question of which is it? Is it both? Is it one? Is it the other?
I was speaking to the fact that you seemed somewhat surprised that you needed to look up the phrase just now, throwing someone under the bus. When you used that phrase,
I know what the
did you
phrase
not know what it
means.
meant last week when you used it?
I know what the phrase
Why
means.
did you look it up today then?
I wanted to make sure the commissioner understood what the phrase meant.
Okay.
Thank you for your
So there
input.
wasn't any hostility. I apologize.
There's no hostility,
because it
just
didn't look like it.
clarification.
Is there any other public comment on this item? Is there a motion for approval?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 18-7569.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Hayes' absence will be recorded as a negative. It'll be 4-1. Administration? Oh, good, you're coming back. Do you need a break, Joe? No. Okay. We'll move on to administration, 7.1.
Item 7.1, second reading ordinance number 18-10943, adopting amendments to Chapter 13 of the Salina Code pertaining to equal opportunity.
Since first reading, there has not been any further communication to us. Is there any comment from the public at this time? Is there a motion to approve this item on second reading?
Mayor Ryan, I move we approve on second reading ordinance number 18-10943, adopting amendments to Chapter 13 of the Salina Code pertaining to equal opportunity.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Hay?
Aye.
Commissioner Hodges?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick?
Aye.
Mayor Ryan?
Aye. 7.2.
Item 7.2, second reading ordinance number 18-10948, changing the zoning district classification from R2 multifamily residential to C5 service commercial on property legally described as Lot 7, Block 6 of the Episcopal Military Institute Edition.
Since first reading, we've had no further communication on this item either. Is there anyone from the public that'd like to address this item? And we'll have a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, move approval on second reading ordinance number 18-10948.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We'll have a roll call for 7.2.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Hay?
Aye.
Commissioner Hodges?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick?
Aye.
Mayor Ryan?
Aye. That item passes 5-0. 7.3.
Item 7.3, second reading ordinance number 18-10949, changing the zoning district classification from R1 single-family residential to C5 service commercial on property addressed as 1038 Johnstown Avenue.
Again, there's been no communications on this item since first reading. Is there anyone that would like to address the second reading of this item?
Mayor and Commissioners, I believe you may recall that this item related to a pending sale of property, and so I think Mr. Andrew has a status update for you in that regard.
Thank you.
Because this is a 1031 like-kind exchange and there are some additional issues involved with that, the closing did not occur as of today. It is currently scheduled to physically close on the 11th of July. So your options this afternoon would be to move ahead with the second reading, or if you feel more comfortable, you could postpone second reading until we can confirm that the closing has occurred. And based on our calendar, postponing it to July 16th would be after the July 11th scheduled closing date. So those would be your two options to move ahead with the second reading, or if you feel more comfortable postponing till we can confirm the closing, then the appropriate date for postponement would be the 16th of July.
Discussion on that, Commissioners?
Does Mr. Richardson have any problem? Does he have any problem delaying that until the 16th if we would do that?
I mean, the zoning is of no value to him until he actually owns the property. Yeah, it was done with the best of intentions, but they're trying to do it as a like-kind exchange, and there's a few things that they have to work through from a tax standpoint.
And if we approve that on second reading today, that can be reversed with a different ordinance in the future if that's not purchased.
Yeah,
Is
it
that
would
correct?
be, if you did it on second reading, it would take an entirely different ordinance, whereas if you waited, then you could just, and nothing actually got finalized, then you could just rescind this ordinance.
Just to clarify, take an entire rezoning process all over again.
Right, it would start an entire process.
Time and notice and...
So, yes, it would be, from the delay standpoint, doing second reading and then having to rescind or repeal that would be more time-consuming than waiting 2 weeks, if that's where your comfort level is.
Well, I think since there are no bulldozers ready to start working, we can just postpone this. I'm sorry, Mr. Andrew, did you say the 16th or the 9th? If say have to be the 16th because it doesn't close till the 11th. Yeah.
If it closed the 11th, then we could report that to you on the 16th, but if you just postponed it a week, we'd be having the same discussion. So the 16th seems the better date.
All right. In that case,
Motion to that?
I move we postpone this second reading until our meeting on July 16th, 2018.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will table the ordinance 1810-949 to the 16th. 7.4.
Item 7.4, consideration of proposed city manager executive search firms and transmittal letter inviting statements of qualifications.
Mr. Bankston, do you want to comment about the list?
Well, I'll be happy to begin that conversation, and based upon your direction, I spoke with Natalie Fisher, and she did the work, and that worked nicely. That's the list you have before you that Natalie compiled, indicating there that she was looking to firms with recruitments in Kansas and the region. And we also have a proposed transmittal letter for you. I think you'll find that the one that is attached to your blue sheet now is somewhat modified from the original draft that I sent out. Commissioner Hodges submitted what I thought was an improvement in terms of just the appropriate amount of information at this initial stage anyway. So that would be my recommendation in terms of the transmittal letter, if that meets your approval. The date is still blank. Didn't know if, depending on when you all wish to go forward, didn't want to be presumptuous about the list or the letter or the timing. But at some point, we will want to put a date in that return deadline. So we're happy to respond to your questions.
Is that a question for you or for Mrs. Fisher about how long we should allow to get a response from the various search firms?
I would expect she knows better.
I did too.
Ms. Fisher? Good afternoon. Thank you for compiling the list for us.
Yeah, thank you
Maybe you
for the
can give us some
opportunity.
insight on the timeline and
Yeah, I don't know that I have a solid recommendation on that. I would speculate a minimum of a 2-week turnaround. I guess the item that I am considering is that we are looking at what I will call phase 1 and not bid on the full process from start to finish. So that should allow for a quicker turnaround time for these firms if they want to proceed. And when I refer to phase 1, I'm talking about that profile development assistance, the guidance or the consultancy that will occur to I guess, help the governing body determine, what that candidate looks like that we're after.
I presume they want to work, so they would answer us fairly quickly.
I would think so. So, yeah,
I'd say the 2 weeks is fine. I don't want to see this drag out and drag out and drag out. I mean, I think, if they're interested in getting back to us and working, I think that the 2 weeks ought to be plenty.
What would the date be of like our Friday before the 23rd meeting? Because then we'd be, wouldn't we, or maybe I guess in order to make the packet deadline, I guess that would have to probably look more like Wednesday or Thursday morning before. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, because I mean, just in doing some math, I was thinking like July 23rd would be a nice deadline to have it by. But by the time we get that, by the time you process that, put that into a packet and everything, then we're already like around the 1st of August. And this is a 5 Thursday month, right? So we wouldn't have a meeting on the.
I don't have my calendar in front of me. I'm sorry.
It is a 5 Monday.
It's a 5
month.
Thursday, or not 5 Thursday, 5 Monday.
5 Mondays.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight about, I don't know, what kind of prospects we're going to get when some of them seem pretty far away from Salina, Kansas? I mean, we've got California and
Washington, Wisconsin.
I would think we could whittle the list a bit.
But we also have nonstop jet service from Denver, so we can get them here.
Tim Rogers is back there with a thumbs up. Thank you for the plug.
That was a plug, Tim.
Yeah, with the list that I've compiled, some seem to have more in terms of volume, but I wanted to be certain that we weren't judging the firms and figured that would not be staff's job to qualify which ones to include and which ones not by purely focusing on the region. But yeah, some do more business in the area than others, and that if that is an exercise
I'd
that
have
you
a
might.
tendency to send it to all of them. Some of them may withdraw themselves because of location. I think I'd let them do that instead of us at this point. So I'm guessing somebody in California may look at us and decide they don't really have the energy to spend on Salina, Kansas. So
if we can agree, if we agree on the letter and the timing, then we can move this forward.
Well, the letter looks good, the list looks good, and today's date sounds good.
Yeah.
do we need a motion or anything to approve that? Or is that?
That'd be helpful, just to be sure that we're following your direction.
So do we?
In terms of the deadline?
Deadline, so that we'll have a list of the prospective search firms to us by the 23rd. Is everybody okay with that?
I would like that.
Okay. Mayor Ryan, I move that we allow staff to, direct staff to mail out I call it a letter of engagement. It's not an engagement letter, a call, I guess is what I would say, to the listed search firms to be back to us and presented to the City Commission on July 23rd.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further comments or discussion?
If I may, I
Thank
have
you.
one quick question, the clarification of the timeline. You want the information in front of you on what date?
I would think to us, and then we're going to have to take a week probably to review that. So I think if you could present it to us at the July 23rd meeting, well, that gives us 2 weeks, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so to present that on July 23rd, I'll need a different deadline for them to
To
respond.
us by 23rd, so whatever date you need, back to you to get to us by the
So that'd
23rd.
probably be like the 18th or something.
That Wednesday would be the 18th.
In a few days is fine, I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that you, as these come in, you didn't want them, you would like me to compile them and then present them.
Yeah, so that
I
looks
think
like the
so.
18th. And that would be like right at 2 weeks.
Thank you, sorry for the interruption.
Thank you.
We have a motion. We need a second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll get out the letter. We have no development business. Other business? Was there further discussion or other comments commissioners wanted to bring up under other business?
One, we do have a new
Yes.
member of the Salina City government now.
Absolutely.
Mr.
Scott
Gage.
Gardner, Scott, if you could stand up, please. He's our new process improvement director. If I'm to describe Scott, I'll start with patient, but for wading through. But he brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and he gives us the opportunity to move to a place we haven't been to before, in my opinion, with regard to process improvement, and just a high quality person. So we're really excited. I told him earlier today, I feel bad I won't be here to experience and see that, but I think you'll look back in a year or two and be exceptionally happy with the results, and he's going to do a wonderful job for you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gage, we had the baseball enterprises give us a nice presentation. Have you had any other communication with them about some of the things they were proposing? They were looking for a development agreement. Any conversation along those lines?
Yeah, not at this point. I think probably we need to come back to you and speak a little bit more of capital improvement planning and timing and some of that. So we did walk away with, there's some funding questions that we need to look at too, as far as source of funding that could potentially help fund that project.
And I don't know if Dr. Tomlins has the copy of the file available electronically, but if that's something that the Baseball Enterprises Group would be willing to share on the city's website, I think that'd be very helpful. I've had a lot of baseball families contacting me about, is this included or is this included? And I think they would be very happy to be able to take a look at that.
Yeah, it's a great suggestion.
Are we ready for a request for executive session?
Yep.
Mayor, I'm going to need about 5 minutes before we start
Okay.
for a break.
How much time will we need for the first item? And we'll add 5 to it.
We're kind of guesstimating at 20 minutes for the first item. And we do not expect any action following the item.
Okay, Mayor Ryan, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 20 minutes to discuss with City Spatial Environmental Legal Counsel confidential matters relating to the pending litigation between the Salina public entities, including the City of Salina and the United States of America, relating to the site of the former Schilling Air Force Base, based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for the public body, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 45-7319B2. The open meeting will resume in this room at, and I'm going to add 5 minutes, so it would be at 6:10.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll go into executive session.